and you're in like a very full train cart listening to what I was listening to in chapter 1. Like, these videos make me laugh, but I don't get them. Do have to admit, Delaney, my girl, what are you doing? But Judah's like, no, 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 no. Or like, why does he stop me from being murdered? Hi, and welcome to this video on my channel. My name is Manon, and today we're gonna talk a little bit about some of the books that I've been reading in the past 2 months. A little bit of a wrap-up. January, I mostly spent reading books that either people had gifted to me or recommended to me. And January, I was just like, just read whatever you want. Like, just go out, read it, what you come across, pick it up, go for it. So there were some amazing reads in there, and there were some in there that I was just like, it's alright, it's okay. 2022. I started off with Every by Dave Eggers, who is also the author of The Circle. Dave Eggers has like created like a sort of alternate universe, like think a little bit more Black Mirror-ish. And The Circle is basically this really big social media platform, very similar to Facebook, like the Meta company that it's under. And that's the first book. You kind of follow around, like see all the consequences of it and how it changes societies and people and all those things. The Every is the sort of sequel, so it doesn't necessarily pick up right where The Circle left off, and it doesn't really follow similar characters. I think there are a few characters are the same, but the main girl is different, and this time we follow Delaney, who wants to very simply destroy the Every. And the Every is like a big company that's very similar to Google, and the Every has taken over The Circle at this point, and also taken over Jungle, which is like Amazon. So it's like this giant monopoly that has taken over every inch of the internet. It's changed societies, and it's changed peoples and how people view each other, and often we're a lot worse off. So it's kind of like it's taken over the worst of people. And Delaney, our main girl, sees this and is like, I need to destroy this company from the inside out. So eventually she gets a job at the Every. That's kind of where we start off, and then we follow her journey into how she goes about her plan and her life, and kind of the consequences of some of her actions. Do have to admit, Delaney, my girl, what are you doing? And the fact is, she doesn't know either. She just goes in, like, she has been dreaming up this opportunity to destroy the Every for years. Like her plan is so vague. It's just like, only thing is just like, I'm gonna give slight ideas, and then people will run with it, and I'll make it all worse until people will lose their shit. Like, girl, like, she doesn't know what she is doing. She has no idea where she's going. Her plan has no strategy, has no foundation. And I'm just reading through this book going like, oh, you could do so many different things. Why? Why? So the ending did not surprise me one bit. We could have seen it coming from like page 1, basically. And then I read Untamed by Glennon Doyle. This is kind of like a memoir self-help book. Also, someone gifted it to me. It was like, I love this book, you should read it too. And that person said that over a year ago. So it's like, maybe it's time that I do start reading this. I'm not a big fan of memoirs or self-help books, but you know, I think if a friend of mine advised it, I was like, and gifted it to me, I was like, I should really read it. You know what, for self-help memoir books, I was alright with it. I didn't hate it. I felt like for me, she didn't really enlighten me. I think I also didn't go into the book with needing help or needing answers to the questions, so I think therefore it probably wasn't the book that I would have picked up, but I'll admit that I did like the memoir part of it. The way how she talks about her life and how things have changed and how these tips and how she handles her life now in relation to a few years ago. I found them very interesting. I found very beautiful and very kind of inspiring, which, to be fair, doesn't necessarily happen that quickly for me. Another one that I read was We Were Liars by Lockhart. I saw the ebook version and then I got the ebook version because I was like, I remember putting that on my TBR quite a long time ago and just never getting around to it. And it's a relatively short novel, which I think is really good for this one. The story itself, you follow the main girl. I don't really know her name anymore. But you kind of follow her around during the summers, where she's from a very well-off, very rich family who have their own private island, and every summer the family kind of comes together. So like her grandparents with her mom and her aunts and uncles and cousins. They all come together, and every summer they spend a whole summer there, and it's like her two cousins, and like a friend of the family. They're all like around the same age. They all hang out together, they have friends, like they are enjoying summer the way that you do. Then one summer, something happens, and she doesn't quite remember what's going on. She does remember waking up or getting dragged out of the ocean. She doesn't wake up. She gets dragged out of the ocean, wakes up in the hospital, and is like, what's going on? I can't reach anyone. You know, she doesn't really know what's happened and what the hell happened that summer. She's like very much amnesia about it. And everyone's kind of like coy, like, what happened? What didn't happen? So you kind of follow her along during like before that specific summer. Then you kind of read little bits and pieces at the beginning of the summer that she does remember. And then we switch to what happens after. And a very big part of the book is about figuring out what has happened that summer. I was pretty sure it would happen, and it did happen. So in that sense, no surprise. But nonetheless, I did really enjoy reading it and follow the main girl around and her slowly figuring out what has happened. And I think in that sense becomes also like kind of like a psychological sense to it, which I enjoyed. I do admit, I think Barefoot was good. It was below 200 pages because I think if it would have lasted a lot longer, I would have lost complete interest. And because it was relatively short, I could just take it. I read it in almost like one go and get close and was like, oh, this was good. Like it didn't drag on too long. If you're looking for a short novel that's kind of intrigue, interesting, talks about like class privilege a little bit, talks about a lot of family dynamics and how that can alter like and embed into different generations, I felt it was a very interesting read. Then I read this one, The Once and Future Wishes by Alix Harrow, and this is by far one of my favorite books of the past 2 months. And I also gotta admit, my friend chose it for me. We went to a bookstore quite a long time ago, or a few months ago, and we went like, let's buy a book for the other person based on a specific prompt. And I think the prompt was something like a story with like a feminist undertone, darker undertones from like a female point of view. And this one delivers. Like, delivers. This is one of those books like the girls that get it, get it. The story itself, you follow 3 sisters who have been kind of estranged from each other, and right at the beginning of the book, they find each other again. And it plays itself in Salem, Massachusetts, I think New Salem, Massachusetts, and 19th century. This is around the time from the suffragettes movements. I don't know if they call it the suffragettes. Moved in the US, did they? Anyways, the feminist movement. One specifically like is going to join. She's like, I want to vote, I want rights. One of them studied, works in a library, is like not super fond of it, and is kind of like in the background. The third one is working class, works at a mill, works very long hours, hardly gets any pay, and it's like, I'm too busy, I'm not interested, this isn't gonna change anything. Ultimately, they all end up in the suffragettes movement. I'm just gonna call it suffragettes. I don't know if it was like that in the US, but I'm gonna call it. You know what I mean. Now you think, Manon, that doesn't sound like super interesting. What's going on? Well, turns out that this world, these three sisters are kind of like have witch blood in them, kind of like alluded to that. I think they also kind of say it also. And everyone has kind of like small spells, like do you have sore feet at the end of the day? This is a little spell that you can do with it. And if you want to dye your hair in a certain color, you know, all of those like very small around the house spells, potions, things that can help out with whatever. They start their own movement, basically. So they go away from the main group that they're at due to reasons and start their own and really embed into like we're the witches version of it. And they collect people and they start collecting spells and starts fighting for their rights and start a movement. Now that isn't everything, because there's like a whole lore behind it of like the mother, the crone, and the maiden, and like a big tower with all the knowledge that they're trying to find, because there is very dark magic at play in New Salem that wants to tear them down and wants to take reins. And so they're trying to like simultaneously figure out like what's going on there. We need to run for our lives. We need to fight. What's up? And it's a solid read, but let me tell you that it's worth every page. This has like very strong female characters, charming male characters that are also like super supportive of the females, which is like all we're asking for. It talks about family relationships and sisters, and it talks about what it's like to be a woman in this world, and also talks about what you can do to change. And it's got an LGBT relationship. It talks about race differences, and it talks about class differences. And I think it's like this really great story all rolled into one that keeps you going, that keeps you interested. So definitely recommend this one. Then I took the plunge because, to be fair, I have been out of the game with reading for a very long time. I think I stopped reading end of high school, like 16, 17. Didn't read for 5-6 years, like a lot, not that much. So I missed a lot of YA fantasy novels. And I saw this one. The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, which I'd never read before. I've only seen the art and the memes about Garden and Jude, and people love their characters. So I was like, if I'm gonna start reading and falling back into YA fantasy, let's start with one of the bigger ones that I've seen around and I don't understand anything. Like, these videos make me laugh, but I don't get them. I initially just bought the physical copy of this one, went through it like crazy, then got the ebook versions because I couldn't wait. Like, I would order it and then I had to wait for it to come, when I could just go online, order the ebook, and within a minute I could read it. Instant gratification. So I think I went through the trilogy in about 4 days, which is insane. The story itself, which I also should mention, you follow Jude. It's completely from her point of view. Her twin sister and her older sister, half's older sister, they are kidnapped, and brought from the human world into the Fae world. And that's due because her oldest sister her father is Fae and her mother is human, and they share the same mother. So that's where they grow up. And I think they were like around 7-ish, 6, 7 maybe, when they're taken. She grows up in the Fae world. Here's the thing, they're very discriminatory against humans. So she's kind of like, this is my home, I want to live here, but to do that I need to carve out like a place for myself to be allowed to stay here and to be of some significance in this place that I call home. Now, there are different ways of doing this. Like, her twin sister's like, I'm gonna get married to like a Fae because they're kind of dependent on them. But Judah's like, no. I'm gonna be part of the royal guard, or knight's guard or whatever. She's gonna be a guard at the palace, at the Shelley court. That's her thing. So she needs to win the favor of one of the persons of the royal family. That's where it kind of starts off and starts following it. You kind of follow her journeys in trying to find out, like, carve out this place and being sort of like allowed to stay and not be like feel superimposed on being there. So it's a lot of mischieful, like enemies to lovers, because Carden is one of the princes. And like, well, they're supposed to really hate each other, and I think they sort of do, but also not really, which was one of the things that I was like, at this book, like I was expecting this epic enemies to lovers story, and that one didn't really deliver for me. Like on some occasions it did. I think right from the beginning, she was like, yeah, I didn't like him, and then 4 pages in when they actually meet, they're like, okay, let's be realistic, there's more going on here. It was too soon, like, and you're just like, we all hate each other, we both like despise, and it's like, well, you clearly don't, due to the small little things that he caught the other one doing. Or like, why does he stop me from being murdered? And like, Carden at this place, like, supposed to be like the cruel prince. She was like the worst of the worst. And to be fair, that wasn't really sold to me either. Stops it a lot of things from escalating. Whereas he's supposed to be known that like he escalates. Like he escalates until someone dies. And I think that's like very briefly at the beginning she sort of demonstrated, but for me it feels so out of place to what we've seen previously and what we see after of him that I'm just kind of like, what is going, like, and I feel like at the end of the 3rd book, how like tries to explain it, where it all comes from, that's like, he really is cruel. I like kind of forgot that he was. It was like, okay, now I gotta be fair, I did love the world building. I enjoyed all the different types of fairies. Like normally there's Fae, they all look super beautiful and human, pointy ears, whatever. And she's like, no, let's branch out. Let's show different types of Fae. Let's show all these different types that come around. I also very much enjoyed, especially in the 2nd book, more political intrigue into it, which I felt was like fun to have a slightly different take on rising to the top. I think it was an okay fantasy series. Why fantasy series? I understand the complete love that people have for it. I think for me it just wasn't really it. I will keep reading YA fantasy novels and series because it's just fun. So we're gonna continue that one. Okay, so the last 2 books that I finished just last week is another memoir, and I'm reading one now. It's like, all of a sudden, I'm turning into this person who's reading memoirs for fun, and I never thought I'd be that person. And maybe I'm surprising myself this year. So the memoir that I read in February is Crying in H Mart by Zauner, which I had on my TBR for a very long time, and this time I was like, let's get to it. And I really loved it. I think, so do you cry right at the beginning? Yes. Do you cry a lot later in the book? Also yes. Like, there's a lot of smiling, a lot of crying involved, and I think for me there was also like a lot of moments where I recognized my own life experience, whether that is between the relationship with my mom or having someone very close to you, losing a person close to you to cancer. Yeah, that was just, it was so, like, Zauner has like a way of writing that it's kind of raw in the relationships that she has and how she views the world and how fed up she is in certain parts. Like, she talks about the relationship that she has with her mom, and then how her mom is diagnosed with cancer. And you kind of, for a very big part of the book, you follow their journey and, well, mostly her experience through that process. Outside of like the relationship and the experience that she has with her mom during the whole process when her mom is diagnosed with cancer, she also talks about her difficulty in finding her identity and who she is, because she's, as a Korean American, because she doesn't really feel 100% like American US, but she also doesn't really feel 100% Korean. through the entire book, you also follow her journey in how her mom was an amazing cook and made a lot of Korean dishes, and how she tries to hold on to her mom and find her mom through food. But it's so well done. No, that's an unintentional food pun. It just, by collecting all those things together, it was just a really beautiful memoir to read. I've loved it very much, and I think for someone who doesn't necessarily read a lot of memoirs and doesn't really enjoy reading them, I really enjoyed and loved reading this one. So we have reached the final book that we're going to discuss, which is the last book that I read, which is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker-Chen. And this is like kind of an historical fantasy fiction novel, which it's based on some historical events. To a certain level, I have to admit, I don't really know, because it plays itself in the 14th century in China. And as much as I like to know more about world history, 14th century China is not something that I'm particularly familiar with. So therefore it actually was super interesting to read. And to later on, because I finished the book and then I looked for it, I learned that it's actually based on some historical events or alludes to them. I was like, yes, awesome. So yeah, love that part, to get that one out of the way. The story itself, you follow our main girl. To be fair, I don't really know her name, and that's simply because at the beginning of the book, she changes with her brother, her older brother. She and her family are very poor, live in a very small village, and there's a major famine going on. And when bandits attack their village, her father dies, and her older brother also succumbs. Now, why does she change her identity from who she is to pretend to be her brother? That's because when her and her brother are younger, they both get like shown or told their own fate. Her brother is told to have like a fate of greatness. He will lead 10,000s of people, if not more. He will be remembered for years and years, and everyone will know who he is, and then, like a fate of greatness. And then she kind of asks, like, what is mine? And this person's like, nothing. You'll be nothing. Then the village is like attacked by the bandits. Her father dies, her brother dies. And she's like, he was not supposed to die. Like, he was meant for greatness. So what's going on? Now she's left there alone, no food, nothing. And then she realized that her brother was supposed to go to a monastery and go there and study. So she takes on the identity of her brother, Chu Chungba, and goes to the monastery, tries to get in, gets let in, and then you kind of, for a part of the book, you follow her story of how she deals with it and how she has to learn and how she kind of navigates there by also being a woman, and how she kind of starts having trouble with like her identity and who she is. So that's one part of the book she is. So then the other story that we have is a general, and from the Mongols, and they have the empire. So at this point it's the Mongols versus Yuan, and the general is actually originally part of the Yuan, but it's not a general for the Mongols, and that's because his whole family got murdered, and he survived by basically begging to be staying alive. But through that process, he also was made a eunuch. He's worked his way up. He's like really good friends now with the prince, the crown prince, and he's a really good general. Like, he's got a great strategic mindset. Wins a lot of wars and fights. He's on the other side. He has his own fate going on, and his own fate of like what he needs to do in life. And then at a certain point, he goes to the monastery that Chu Chungba is at and destroys it. And at this point, Chu Chungba's like, okay, I've just taken my brother's identity and name. I have nowhere to go. You know what? I'm gonna chase after my brother's fate. His promise of greatness. That sets her on the path by joining the rebellion. And that's how her and the general meet a few times. There's nothing romantic between them. I might sound like that, but there isn't. They kind of set each other on their distinct path of faith. Faith's a really big thing there. There's a lot of other fantastical elements, but through it all, it's such an interesting read. I really enjoyed it by just understanding their thought process of these two main characters and how they are trying to figure out who they are, deal with their traumatic past, deal with their fates. They both have like their own struggles with their bodies and who they are through that and who they feel that they are. So the story also deals with a lot of LGBTQ elements and how that happens. Yeah, and finding your faith and your greatness and who you are and some fantasy elements. I really enjoyed it. Like, I really loved the book. I'll do admit though, if you do listen to an audiobook, which I did, or maybe you're reading it and you get to chapter 21, I believe, don't be in public. Like, I had a full days of work, I was in the train, I was like, put the audiobook on. And chapter 21 started and it's explicit, which I didn't expect. So here I'm like, putting it like, oh, just close my eyes a little bit, just listen to the book. I need to chill. I'm like, oh, sorry, what? Okay. Alright, that's, I mean, get it, girl. Alright. And you're in like a very full train cart listening to what I was listening to in chapter 1. I was very happy that I didn't have a lot of audio, that I didn't have a physical copy. Not that I felt like it was very out of sorts. It made sense in the story. I had just plugged it in and didn't realize that that was about to happen. Little tip. Chapter 21. Not for the public eye. But yeah, other than that, really enjoyed the book. I'm looking forward to when the next one in the series come out. I think it's supposed to be a duology. Maybe there are going to be more, I don't know. But I'm really looking forward to the next one, which I think comes out later this year. That's kind of what I read. And I think I've been talking for a very long time. So anyways, I hope you guys kind of enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys again next time. Up until then, happy reading!